It looked like just another chrome-trimmed American family car, but the Chevrolet Bel Air quietly introduced ideas, risks, and engineering choices that most people never notice at first glance. Built in large numbers and remembered across generations, it became one of Chevrolet's most recognizable names. But behind that familiar shape are a series of real, documented details that even many enthusiasts overlook. In this story, you will discover 7 surprising and lesser-known truths about the Bel Air that reveal how it truly shaped its era. What most people assume is that the Bel Air was always meant to be a flagship model. But the reality is very different. When it appeared in 1950, it wasn't even a full model line, it was just a premium trim level applied to a 2-door hardtop. Chevrolet used it as a way to test whether buyers would pay more for style and comfort without changing the underlying car. The surprising part is how quickly that experiment succeeded. Within just a few years, by 1953, the Bel Air became its own series. This wasn't a marketing accident, it was a direct response to customer demand. For drivers, it meant something important. You could now own a car that looked and felt upscale without paying luxury brand prices. It quietly changed how American families defined value in a car. Now consider 1955, a year often remembered for styling, but far more important for what was under the hood. This was when Chevrolet introduced its new small-block V8 engine. What makes this surprising is not just the power, but the design philosophy. Instead of building a larger, heavier engine, Chevrolet engineers focused on making it compact, lighter, and easier to produce. The reason was practical. America's new highway system demanded cars that could cruise comfortably at higher speeds. The result was an engine that delivered strong performance while remaining affordable and reliable. In everyday life, this meant smoother acceleration and confidence on long drives. Over time, this engine became one of the most influential designs in automotive history, and the Bel Air was one of the first cars to bring it to the public in a widely accessible way. But here is a detail that often goes unnoticed, even among enthusiasts. In 1958, Chevrolet introduced an X-frame chassis design on its full-size cars, including the Bel Air. At first glance, you wouldn't see it, it was hidden beneath the body. The reason behind it was to lower the car's height while increasing interior space and improving ride comfort. This allowed for a sleeker appearance and a wider cabin. However, the trade-off is what makes this detail truly surprising. Compared to traditional perimeter frames, the X-frame offered less side impact protection. At the time, this was not widely discussed, but in later years it became a point of criticism. For drivers in that era, the benefit was immediate comfort and style. Looking back, it reveals how engineering priorities often balance design, cost, and safety in ways that are viewed differently today. Another little-known but fully documented feature appeared in 1957, when Chevrolet offered a mechanical fuel injection system on certain V8 models, including the Bel Air. This system, known as Rochester fuel injection, was also used in the Chevrolet Corvette during the same period. The surprising part is how advanced this was for its time. While most cars relied on carburetors, this system delivered fuel more precisely, improving performance under specific conditions. The reason Chevrolet introduced it was to demonstrate engineering capability and compete in the growing performance market. In real-world driving, it provided quicker throttle response, but it also required careful maintenance and added cost. Because of this, relatively few buyers chose it. Today, those rare fuel-injected models are especially valued, not just for performance, but for representing an early step toward modern engine technology. As the 1960s progressed, many people assumed the Bel Air simply faded away. But that's not what actually happened. Instead, Chevrolet deliberately repositioned it within its lineup. With the rise of the Chevrolet Impala, which offered more features and visual presence, the Bel Air became a more practical, value-focused option. The surprising part is that this shift was intentional, not accidental. Chevrolet was segmenting its market, offering different levels of trim to different types of buyers. For drivers, this meant the Bel Air became known for reliability and straightforward design rather than luxury. It continued to sell in significant numbers, serving customers who prioritized durability over decoration. Closely connected to this shift is something most people rarely think about. The Bel Air became one of the most commonly used full-size cars in fleet service during the 1960s and early 1970s. It appeared in taxi fleets, government use, and other high-mileage roles. The reason was simple but important: its body-on-frame construction, widely available parts, and relatively simple mechanical layout made it easier to maintain over long periods. For everyday people, this meant the Bel Air was not just seen at car shows, it was part of daily life. You might have ridden in one as a taxi or seen it working on city streets. That kind of exposure created a different kind of legacy, one built on familiarity and trust rather than exclusivity. Here is another detail that even longtime fans sometimes miss. The term Tri-5, used today to describe the 1955, 1956, and 1957 Chevrolet models, including the Bel Air, was never used by Chevrolet during those years. It was coined later by enthusiasts and collectors as a way to group these three closely related designs. The reason this matters is that it shows how the car's identity continued to evolve after production. What began as a simple naming convenience became part of automotive culture. For collectors today, the Tri-5 label represents a specific era of design and engineering that remains highly valued. Finally, consider how the Bel Air came to an end in the United States. Many assume it disappeared because it was no longer popular, but the reality is more complex. By the early 1970s, new emissions regulations, safety requirements, and fuel economy concerns were reshaping the entire automotive industry. Larger cars were becoming more difficult to adapt to these changing conditions. Within this environment, Chevrolet gradually reduced the role of the Bel Air. In 1975, it was discontinued in the US market, although it continued in some international markets for a short period. This was not a sudden failure, but a reflection of broader changes affecting all manufacturers. For drivers who had grown up with the Bel Air, its disappearance marked the quiet end of a familiar presence. When you look at the Chevrolet Bel Air with these details in mind, the story becomes clearer. It was not defined by a single feature or moment, but by a series of decisions, some bold, some practical, and some controversial, that shaped its path over time. These are the kinds of details that don't always appear in brochures or advertisements, yet they are the ones that explain why the car is still remembered decades later. Did you ever ride in a Bel Air, or perhaps see one in everyday use during its time? Share your memory below, because those personal stories are an important part of keeping its legacy alive. And if this brought back something familiar, consider sharing it with someone who appreciates the history behind these machines.